elected. Let's bring in our politician panel, I should say now. We're joined by Coalition Senator Susan McDonald and also Labor MP Josh Wilson. Thank you both so much for joining us. We'll get to the vaccine in a moment. I just want to start, though, with Andrew Peacock, and perhaps first to you, Susan McDonald. Your memories, your thoughts this morning?
Oh, well, it's always sad when you lose somebody who's been a leader for the nation, and I'm sure that it is his family who are most deeply affected and reflecting on his life. But he played a significant role in Australia and Australia's politics, and you know, it's a moment to mark that input and to reflect sadly on his passing. And
Josh Wilson, he was a leader, a man who could reach across the aisle, and that's been remembered in some of the remarks today.
Yes, well, I remember Andrew Peacock. I guess I was pretty young then, following politics in the 1980s, and on the coalition side, there was the kind of contest between John Howard and Andrew Peacock, and they contested the leadership fiercely at the time. But there's a lot of respect between the two men now, and I heard former Prime Minister John Howard's remarks about that this morning, and I think it's right that we pay respect to people who made the kind of contribution that Mr. Peacock did make, and our thoughts, of course, with his family and friends at this time.
Yeah, very nice words. Now, moving on to the vaccination program, we've, as David has said, the Prime Minister flagged that people who have been vaccinated in Australia could travel overseas, could travel back again and not do hotel quarantine, could quarantine at home. Now, as we know, the vaccination program has been left lagging. Is this where the conversation should be at the moment?
Yes, well, I assume you're sorry, I'm not sure whether you're talking to me or Susan, but the vaccine rollout is the key to all of these things. There's no doubt that we want the ability to travel overseas. We'd like to see international visitors coming to Australia, but the vaccine rollout has to be achieved competently for that to be the case, and we haven't seen that so far. So it's all good and well to look forward to the ability to open up. It depends on the vaccine rollout, and that is way off track because it's been bungled by the government presently. They had plenty of time, and we were under not nearly as much pressure as many comparable countries in getting ourselves ready to roll out the vaccine, and yet we've done it much more slowly than those comparable countries. We've missed all of the targets and the deadlines that the government set for itself, and it's a little bit hard to see how we're going to get to the point of some kind of comprehensive coverage by the end of 2021, which means it'll carry into 2022, holding back our economic recovery.
Susan McDonald, a response to that, but also just whether the government is preparing us with comments from the Prime Minister like the sensible next step is home quarantine for an Australia where we are living with a low level of virus. Is that the only way that we can open up these borders?
Look, I'm wildly disappointed to hear those comments earlier about the, you know, very politicising what has been a really challenging rollout. We had overseas countries, Europe, delay the exports to Australia of vaccinations. I'm here in northern Queensland. Can I tell you that Queensland Health has been vaccinating people who sit in offices rather than doctors and nurses on the front line? I don't think we should be politicising this, because nobody is going to most particularly Australians are not going to get a win out of it. We need people vaccinated so that we can return to living as we have previously, that we can enjoy travel, not just overseas but around our own countries. And yesterday I was in Burketown. The Queensland Health pulled out of Burketown vaccinations just as recently as that. They're promising that they'll come back, but this is a community that has more than 50% Indigenous population, Doomadgee just down the road. They're all desperate to see Queensland Health on the ground vaccinating people so that we can move to the next stage. And as Australians, whether we be from states or territories or from the federal arena, it's important that we just get on with the job, because what this has done is it has shaken confidence for Australians in the vaccination program. We are now hearing people saying, I don't know that I want to be vaccinated at all. You know, that's the worst outcome that we have. I think we should be focused on rolling out as smoothly as we can, getting Australians protected, getting back to business.
You talk about politicising the vaccine rollout, Susan McDonald, but it was the Liberal Party that put its stamp on some of the paraphernalia that went out around the vaccine program. It was the Prime Minister who set down the targets that have now been missed, and according to the states, it was the federal government that picked a fight as well.
Look, we can go backwards and forwards on those sort of issues. Australians aren't really interested. They expect the federal and state and territory governments to show leadership, to roll out the vaccination process. There are vaccines available. They are ready to be administered by the local health authorities, and now we need Australians to show up, to make the appointments, to get vaccinated so that we can have as many people with as high a level of cover as we possibly can.
Josh Wilson, what's your reply to that? We know your leader's very energised on this issue of the vaccination rollout.
Well, Labor will continue to be constructive about the health response. We were from the start. It's true that we need to work together as a nation to deal with the pandemic, but I think when members of the government complain and cry about politicisation, what they're essentially saying is we don't want to be held to account. And you can't go and put a big Liberal logo on advertising that is essentially government-funded advertising around the vaccine, and then come crying about being held to account for your own administration. I mean, there have been serious administrative bungles in the rollout so far, and the government needs to fix it. We know with this government that they're reluctant to take responsibility when it's pointed out to them. If it wasn't pointed out to them, you can imagine what they would do. So I think the government needs to stop being so defensive and knuckle down to the task, which is to secure enough vaccine and to do it in the rollout in a way that actually achieves the ends that we all know need to be achieved.
Moving on to the...
It's so incredibly unreasonable to talk about that when in Queensland, in Townsville, Queensland Health is vaccinating people who are not on the front line. So let's just get on with the job at every level of government, and the more that we talk about politics in it and try and sheet it home to one group or another, the more Australians won't be vaccinated. And we will be looking back at this moment where we had a divide in the road, where we either decided to get behind a vaccination process, to look at practical measures on the ground for communities like Burketown and Doomadgee and here in Townsville, rather than talk about some administrative process in Canberra. They're not the people doing the administrations in Townsville. Let's talk and support those processes, get people administered, particularly the most vulnerable who we're desperate to protect.
We had Christine Holgate appear before the Senate inquiry hearing this week. Now, she has a lot of support from Australia Post franchisees and workers, and of course they have the ability to make their voices heard ahead of any election, whenever that should be. Susan, is this an issue that's going to cause fraction, or perhaps is causing pressure within the coalition at the moment?
Well, I think the Australia Post issue broadly is a very important one. Going into the last state election, we had problems with mail deliveries for postal votes and for returns of votes. So I'm very interested in regional services. Christine Holgate has done a terrific job with Australia Post. She was given a huge task, which was to commercialise what has been, you know, a public entity, a public provider for so long. She's done a great job. She does have broad support. But when there were questions asked during estimates, when Senator Kitching and others started asking questions about bonuses and grants, they used a public forum to start examining operational management issues in Australia Post. And now we're going to discuss it right through the next period up until the election, I'm sure, because Australians are interested in what happens with mail delivery. It's been an important part during COVID, how your parcels and boxes and online shopping is delivered. So Australia Post is a very important part of our culture.
Just on that, Susan McDonald,
you
wouldn't support any attempt to sell off the profit-making arm of Australia Post at this point, packaging and the like?
Well, you know, I'm from regional Australia. I think that there is a very important part of the customer service obligation for all of our big entities that service this massive nation that we have. So no, I would not be supportive of privatising a key delivery service, which is Australia Post, right across the country.
Well, the review that suggested that it could be privatised, it's been with the government for a year now, and given that it's been highlighted in this Senate inquiry, should it be made public now?
Oh, I've not seen the review. I assume that the government has had some other issues to manage with COVID and businesses and families over the last 12 months. I'm sure we'll get to that in good time. These are not discussions that should be rushed.
Josh Wilson, quite a bit to respond there too, perhaps starting with Christine Holgate and this week. She claimed that the treatment of her by the Prime Minister was sexist.
Well, look, I think we saw the Prime Minister's character through the Christine Holgate affair. I mean, he is prepared to be super aggro when it comes to defending his own backside, and then super lax when it comes to incompetence and misconduct on his side. So it's both barrels for Christine Holgate. It's the trapdoor for Christine Holgate. It's the feather duster for people on his own side. Angus Taylor, Stuart Robert, who inflicted this industrial-scale robo-debt terrorism, really, on tens of thousands of disadvantaged Australians. They get a promotion. They get to meet the Prime Minister later on for a cigar in the PM's courtyard. It's the trapdoor, and both barrels for Christine Holgate, and that goes to the character of the Prime Minister. But as you scratch the surface around the Holgate affair, of course, you discover that there is this secret report that was commissioned with a view to privatising Australia Post and sacking thousands of Australia Post employees, with the inevitable consequence that you get poorer services and higher costs, because that's what privatisation always delivers. And the burden of those higher costs and the burden of those poorer services fall on rural and regional Australians. So it's good to hear Susan speaking up in defence of those services, but I guess you have to ask whether it'll be too little too late when those kinds of reports and considerations are undertaken by an Australia Post board stacked with Liberal mates and appointees, which is another consistent theme of this government, and they go quietly and steadily along in the background on their mission, and their mission is generally to privatise public services and to hell with the consequences for ordinary Australians.
OK, we're out of time, but Susan McDonald, just 20 seconds to respond to that.
I think it's extraordinary that here is a man defending Labor who privatises as fast as they can get their hands on Australian assets. So it's a ridiculous argument, but I'm sure that we'll see we'll move forward on this, because there are more serious issues to discuss for Australia right now.
OK, Susan McDonald and Josh Wilson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.